All right, we are now going to proceed with our discussion proper. By the way, to those who have just tuned in, my name is Marvin and this is Akone Projects. And feel free to go back to the previous part or the earlier part of this video for the introduction and some information about how to get your certificates for this event. All right. In the meantime, let's proceed with our topic for tonight, the fourth and last topic of our DRRM 4.0 Innovation plus Sustainability webinar workshop. Okay, specifically, we are going to talk about smart disaster recovery and rehabilitation. So, without further ado, let's start by, of course, having a quick recap of our um, four sessions of this webinar workshop. So at the end of this webinar workshop, participants will use smart systems and structured methods to support disaster prevention and mitigation. And we did that during session one with the help of um, constructing a hierarchy form that was visualized using Google Colab. Plus, we featured the public app called Project NOAA for hazard identification in your chosen location. Right? So that's the first one. And another is apply data-driven approaches to enhance preparedness and situational awareness. So here we focus more on earthquake disasters as our examples there, where we featured the app developed by Fivolx. I think that was georisk.ph. So it's actually a branch or um, a set of different apps under georisk.ph by Fivolx. So we can using those apps we can collect data that will help us become more prepared or come up with the necessary plans for our a more effective disaster response, recovery, and rehabilitation. And of course, on the third session, we tried to demonstrate the use of AI tools for faster and more informed emergency response. Okay, so for the first one, we highlighted or emphasized the use of smart systems, and on the second session, we amplified that further by incorporating the concept of IoT for a more real-time data-driven approach. And with the help of analytics, we can come up with intelligence for uh, that we can use for improving our DRRM initiatives. And on the third session, we leveled that up with the use of AI. Okay, so AI can be used for a more intelligent monitoring and response of the situations, different situations that require or that are in their need of immediate disaster response, especially the most vulnerable parts. So we can make use of drones for collecting real-time data, plus evaluating the situation on the concerned area. Plus, we can use AI um, for developing more intelligent robots that can substitute to human beings, especially in areas that cannot be easily accessed by human beings and vehicles. Okay, so we have seen that smart systems can, with the help of AI, IoT and AI, um, can be uh, can be much more effective and can offer more promising benefits to the users, especially within the context of DRR. And right now, our goal is to integrate IoT and analytics to support sustainable recovery and rehabilitation planning. Especially, our goal is to, or most of the things that we're going to talk about are concerning spatial data. Spatial meaning geographical or geospatial data. Um, right? Especially we are going to talk about disaster recovery and rehabilitation. So we are concerned with the with maps, okay? And we want to study as a whole what's going on in the environment. And of course, with the especially we want to see which of these areas this um need immediate response and assistance the most. Okay, so we can do that with the help of IoT analytics and what we call GIS. Okay, so we're going to have a glimpse of that in the few next slides. Okay, so tonight we are talking about smart disaster recovery and rehabilitation as the last topic for our webinar workshop. And this topic actually corresponds to the fourth thematic area of the RRM. So we have disaster preparedness, disaster prevention and mitigation, and then disaster preparedness, and then disaster response, and lastly, disaster recovery and rehabilitation. Okay, so this session highlights how spatial data and GIS-based analytics can support post-disaster assessment and long-term recovery strategies, particularly in identifying impacted areas and support recovery planning. So, meaning now that the disaster has taken place, what should we do? Okay, it's not just enough that we rescue people, we move them to a safer evacuation area, or we provided food and clothing for them. Uh, Remember, when a disaster strikes, some people lose their properties, their livelihood, or their own shelter. So, or much worse, some lose some love, loved ones, unfortunately. So the question is, what can we do to help those people, those members of the community recover? Okay. What can we do to rehabilitate the affected area? So that's our topic for tonight, and it covers these subtopics. So we have what we call data-driven recovery planning, mapping affected areas, resource allocation and monitoring, and sustainable rehabilitation strategies. So with that, we're going to have an activity. That's for the first half of our session. And for the second half of the session, we're going to have an activity regarding collab, and then we're going to feature um, Ubiquiti's ISP Design Center for restoring or trying to have at least an operational communication um, wireless ISP for restoring the communication lines in affected areas. And we are going to feature one of the public web apps and some other um, possible additional tools along the way. Okay, so that will be for the second half. But for the first half, we're going to talk about some matters concerning disaster recovery and rehabilitation. So we've been talking about disasters in the last 4 weeks, for Saturdays. So whether we are talking about drought as disasters, flooding and typhoon, or wildfire, or some man-made disasters, um, we have to know that disasters are not really disasters or natural disasters, or there's no such thing as natural disasters. What we have are natural hazards that can only be amplified if the community um, the community is exposed and vulnerable to such natural hazards. So, for example, communities within coastal areas are exposed to the hazards, the hydrometeorological hazards in um, the water part, in the sea or ocean. Um, they are vulnerable to hazards like storm surge and tsunami. Okay, so we can get rid of the ocean, of course. But what we can do is to make the community less exposed and less vulnerable. Okay? And plus, we can level that up by increasing the capacity of the local government of the community to uh, do the necessary engineering and administrative controls that can that will somehow lessen the severity or likelihood of the concerned disaster, natural disaster. Okay, so we can do something about it, but we cannot get rid totally of the natural hazards. Okay, man-made hazards, probably we can get rid of them, but natural hazards, most likely, no, no. Okay, so remember, when I say disaster, it's a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society at any scale due to hazardous events interacting with conditions of exposure, vulnerability, and capacity, leading to one or more of the following: human, material, economic, and environmental losses and impacts. So those losses and impacts are somewhat um, inevitable but manageable. Okay? So there could be losses, there could be impacts, but we can actually lessen them. We can do something to minimize their extent, right? So disaster becomes a disaster only when we let that happen entirely. Okay? We don't do anything to minimize the possibility of losses and impacts. Okay? That's what uh, a literal disaster actually means. Okay? There's a natural hazard and we don't do something. We don't do anything to manage it. Okay? So remember the RRM stands for Disaster Risk Recovery, I no, Reduction and Management, the RRM. So we have to reduce the risks and manage them. Okay? So remember, risk is a function of the hazards to which a community is exposed and the vulnerabilities of that community. However, that risk is modified by the level of the local preparedness or capacity. Um, of the community at risk. And mathematically, it is expressed by the following notation. Remember this formula? Risk is proportional to the product of hazard and vulnerability. So, um, actually, we also multiply that by the exposure. So hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And then we divide that by capacity. So meaning the higher the exposure and the higher the vulnerability, or at least one of them, the more at risk the community. Okay? But the higher the capacity, uh, we can do something about that by um, either lowering the vulnerability and exposure or by increasing our capacity. So more like our preparedness, our mitigation procedures, preparedness, our plans that are ready to be deployed right away once disaster approaches. So increasing our capacity can actually reduce the disaster risk, meaning we can reduce the possibility of human, material, economic, and environmental losses and impacts. Right? So that's the main essence of the RRM. And I'd like to emphasize the word proactive. Okay? So we don't wait for disasters to happen before we do something. Okay? Way before the disasters take place, we are already doing something about it. We are preparing our plans, our resources, where we are equipping our people, whether they are the community or the response units or members of our emergency response units. We are preparing them, informing them what to do, what to bring, what to prepare, what to store. Okay, so that they can increase their capacity to combat the corresponding risk in a certain natural hazard. Okay, so now remember when we say the RRM, we are talking about for or that automatically incorporates four thematic areas or four parts or components. So first one, during session one, we talk about disaster prevention and mitigation, which is focused more on reducing likelihood and impact of disasters before occurrence. Okay, so way before the disaster comes in, actually it's not even in our timeline here. So way before the disaster strikes, we are already doing something to prevent the risks that come with the natural hazards or any disaster hazards. Okay? So uh after that, or based on what we have identified, especially when we conduct the HIRAC, the hazard identification and risk assessment and control. Okay, that's correct. Well, based on our findings, based on our data-driven analysis, we can come up with things that we can focus more on. Like we can, based on our analysis, we can. It is suggested that we should be more prepared in terms of um, first aid and basic life support. So first, that's for example, or we should be more prepared on um, increasing the survival chance of survival of people evacuating a certain from a certain um, this affected area. Okay, so we can focus more on evacuation, on search and rescue, on providing relief, delivering goods and other things that the affected community would most likely need when the disaster strikes. So we can make all those preparations, and of course, we can make it is very important we come up with our plan. It's already prepared. We everyone knows already what to do whenever once that disaster strikes. Okay, so that's the main goal of disaster preparedness. People are equipped with the necessary knowledge, skills, and tools needed to respond effectively to disasters. Okay? But since natural hazards are normally inevitable, and some man-made hazards, uh, man-made disasters may come as a surprise. So our next line of defense is our disaster response. So um, right before or even right after the disaster strikes, we must activate our response plans. Okay? When we say disaster response, saving lives, reducing damage, and meeting basic needs. So this is the very quick part. So as you can see, this is a very short term. Once the disaster strikes, or even when the disaster is about to strike, everyone's on queue already. Our emergency response units, our resources are on queue already, on standby. Okay, so that right after or as soon as the disaster strikes, go. We give the go signal and the necessary response is provided right away. Okay, so this is very quick. And right after we provide the necessary response, we also activate our disaster recovery and rehabilitation plan. So this includes rebuilding infrastructure, restoring livelihoods, and implementing new measures. So that's our focus for tonight. Okay, and as you can see, the recovery and rehabilitation may come as an intermediate in terms of duration or a long-term one. Okay, so basically depends on the impact of the disaster. So there are disasters that only need very quick recovery and rehabilitation phase, and there are aspects that can't be recovered right away. So they usually take time, especially in terms of agriculture and um, um, community shelters. So they are usually it takes time to rebuild the facilities, the of course the destroyed residential units. So those are usually more of long term. Okay. And what the government usually does for disaster recovery for short term or the immediate term part is providing temporary shelters. Okay. So now let's talk about our first topic. So that's just a quick introduction. Don't worry, we'll try to make it fast and finish everything in an hour. Okay, so first, let's talk about data-driven recovery planning. So that's what I was saying earlier that way before the disaster strikes, we are already equipped with our plans. Okay, we have the plan for disaster recovery, um, uh, or disaster response, and then for disaster recovery and rehabilitation. So those things are being done right after or mini or almost during the disaster, but that doesn't mean we don't do something about them way before the disaster strikes. Okay, so in other words, way before the disaster strikes, we are already coming up with our necessary plans that will that when activated will ensure the a more effective disaster response and recovery. So disaster recovery, as mentioned earlier, it is focused on rebuilding infrastructure, restoring livelihoods, and implementing new measures. Okay, so rebuilding infrastructure that includes our, of course, the homes, the destroyed homes, destroyed public infrastructures like roads and bridges, destroyed agricultural infrastructures like the irrigation systems and possibly the dam. Um, what else? Destroyed uh, telecommunication and power grids. Okay, so they have to be rebuilt in the soonest time possible. Okay, because the only way for the affected communities to recover is to regain the those infrastructure. Okay. Also, restoring livelihoods. Remember when a disaster strikes, especially for the farmers and those who are highly vulnerable to different disasters, uh, they they have no choice. They have to let go of their livelihoods. They cannot bring their farm with them when they are evacuating from the affected area. Okay, so unfortunately, their crops or even their livestocks are not usually easily um, get evacuated or saved from the disaster. So they are normally lost, and which means the livelihood is also lost along the process. So part of disaster recovery and rehabilitation is to do something for the lost livelihoods. Okay. And then implementing new measures. So this is already the part that completes the loop of the RRM. Okay. The RRM is a cycle actually. So now that the disaster has happened, what do we or what have we learned from it? Okay. We have to assess what happened. Okay. Understand what happened, why it happened, what went wrong. Is it something new or is it something that recurs from time to time? So we have to understand. We have to get insights from what happened so that they can serve as inputs for the new cycle of the RRM, which will start again with disaster prevention and mitigation. So remember our hierarchy form, we will update that Okay, we conduct hazard assessment again, risk identification, hazard identification, and then risk assessment, and then come up with the necessary administrative and engineering controls. So that's the process of the RRM. Okay, we are now closing the loop by assessing the impact of the disaster and, of course, learning from it. Right? So rebuilding from this devastation, we aim to recover, and of course, by learning about it, or by learning from the disaster or from the incident, we uh, can implement new measures that will help our the affected community become more resilient. Okay, so um, we mentioned the term data-driven, and that means we are applying the concept of analytics, which we featured especially in almost, I think in all of our three previous sessions, we mentioned something about analytics. And here we are having a quick recap of what actually analytics means and how does it apply in disaster recovery and rehabilitation. So here we have four main types. And actually, in the advent of AI, we now have the fifth type, the cognitive analytics. But we're going to focus more on these first four. Okay, descriptive analytics basically, we do that, we perform that to understand what happened. Okay, so what happened? Okay, and what's the disaster? How high? How wide is the affected area? How many people were affected? How much damage has been incurred, and so on. Okay, at least we know the figures. We know we have some ideas, some information that we can process to come up with a necessary decision, like implementing new rules, new policies within the community, or build something new, or purchase some equipment, uh, of course, to become more resilient. So we cannot do those things if we don't understand what happened in the first place. Okay, so basically, whatever data-driven recovery planning we are going to do, it always starts with understanding what happened. All right. We have to understand first what happened. And if we take it a little bit further, we can actually conduct diagnostic analytics, right? So as you can see, this time we are not just asking what happened, but why did it happen? So we can conduct root cause analysis, why the disaster has been that impactful. Why so many lives were lost? Like what happened in Yolanda back in 2013. Okay, so for the Filipinos, they are aware, but for other people from other nations, they know. I think you know Typhoon Hayat. Okay, so that in the Philippines we call that Yolanda in 2013, and that event um, led to the loss of so many lives. Okay, so I believe that's the turning point in the Philippines. Because of that, the RRM has been more given priority, given um, much more emphasis. Okay, and from in the next in the succeeding years, the DRM or there has been a gradual progress until now. Okay, so the Philippines is still on the way of being a more resilient um, nation in towards different disasters. Unfortunately, along for some reasons, some politicians want something else. Okay, so that's the problem. We could have been more resilient nowadays. We could have been more prepared to different disasters if only the budget was uh used rightfully. Okay, so that's I think that's the bigger disaster in the Philippines now, not the natural disasters, but the man-made disasters. All right. So we try to understand why did it happen. Okay, and if we look at the recent flooding incidents in the Philippines, like what happened in Cebu last year, I think everyone knows a very common answer about why did it happen. Okay? Why was the flooding so severe that caused the loss of so many lives? Okay, so I'm not trying I'm trying not to cry. Um, right, so diagnostic analytics, we try to understand why did it happen, and usually we perform some statistical tests here. Okay, we analyze the different factors or the variables, and eventually we can point out, okay, this is the reason why. This is what caused the impact so severe, and so on. Okay, so usually it still requires some human input so that we can come up with the necessary decision and action. Okay, but if we take it further, we can now make use of our past data, meaning by understanding what happened and why did it happen, we can actually make forecasts. We can generate future data. Okay? Or in other words, we can make predictions. So we can understand what will happen. Or not really understand. We can have idea on what could happen. Okay? So given that, okay, most likely this will happen. So um of course we need to generate our quality data for that. Okay? If we have quality data, then we can have quality forecasting, okay, for our predictive analytics. And actually, this is where AI starts to participate in the process of data analytics. Okay, so in most cases, AI is already intersecting or diverging in our smart and intelligent systems. Okay, so with a little more human effort, we can now come up with the necessary decision and action. Because you know what's about to happen or what more likely will happen, you can now make the necessary decision, like calling all the response units ahead of the expected time of disaster. Because you know that there's um, more possibly disaster to occur, then you call the response units and prepare all the resources in advance. Okay, so that could be your decision and corresponding action. Okay, but to be more certain, we can level up our analytics by answering the question, "What should I do?" or doing what we call prescriptive analytics. All right. So this time the system will do everything. Okay. So it no longer requires human input. What uh what the operators or especially the local government officials and the DRM leaders in that community we will do is to whether to accept the prescribed decision and action by these systems. Okay, so whatever they say, it's up to us if we whether we accept that or we look for um, other ways or other options. Okay, so of course you can only accept that if you are very certain of the data you have inputted, because once again, garbage in, garbage out. If you are not sure of your inputs, then most likely you are not sure of your outputs. You cannot rely on your outputs. Okay, so this is where the advantages of having a smart system and especially IoT-based smart system comes in. Okay, if our IoT system works well, then we can generate quality data that can serve as our input for these analytics. Okay, and actually, um, all of these analytics involve these processes. Okay, we ask questions and define the problem. Okay, we prepare the data by collecting and storing the information. For example, using IoT, we can generate real-time data from the environment, and then we process that and analyze. So this is the core data analysis part. Okay. So we process by cleaning and checking the information. We get rid of any invalid data and we do something about missing portions of data. Okay. So, or portions of our data set. And then whatever the results of our analysis, we of course share that with the audience and then do something about it. Okay. We perform the necessary actions. So we share them so that we share the results, the insights that we got. So for decision making, and then based on the decision making or the results of the decision making, we come up with the necessary action. Okay, so basically that's the process of analytics, and it's very much applicable in the entire process of the RRM, most especially in disaster recovery and rehabilitation. Okay. Of course, why are we analyzing what happened or what's next? What will happen? Because remember, we want to be resilient. We want to build resilient communities. So, in order to prevent the same disaster to happen again, we have to find ways to stop them from recurring. Okay, and we can only do that by understanding the nature of the disaster and the other factors, the different factors that that are involved. Okay, so that's the first one. Now, remember, disaster recovery and rehabilitation involves rebuilding um, stronger communities. We are focused on restoring lives and building a more resilient future. So, because of the disaster, communities have been devastated. So, we have to do something to recover and not just recover, but eventually become more resilient community. So, all right. So some of the engineering and administrative controls that we can build are, of course, rebuilding the infrastructures, the destroyed infrastructures with a more resilient design, right? Meaning those designs that meet the standards, okay, that prescribed by experts. This is the biggest plot hole in our part. Okay, we just build, but the question is, what are we actually building? Okay, so that's the biggest. Building something is does not equate to becoming more resilient or progressive. Okay, quality. So what are we building in the first place? So it's not about the numbers of flood control projects that we build or other infrastructures that can make the community become more resilient, but the quality of what we are building. Okay, do they conform with the resilient design or they only conform with what the politicians want? Anyway, our topic for tonight is more focused on hazard mapping and land use planning. So we're going to feature some apps later on that we can use for as part of disaster recovery and rehabilitation. We want we are going to have a glimpse of what it takes to have a risk-informed development. Um, and then whatever the inputs that we can generate from the disaster that has occurred, we can um, use that as inputs for our next or future plans. Okay, for regarding emergency preparedness and response. Okay, so we can build additional early warning systems if we don't have those systems yet. We can improve our drills and trainings because we know we have learned something new about the recent disaster. Then we take note of that and then apply the corresponding insight for the next preparations. Okay. So of course we can encourage the community to participate and be inclusive with such events. Okay, local engagement and vulnerable groups prioritized. When it comes to decision makings, we always refer to data. We don't just make decisions that okay, we build this one, most likely we need this. No, we have to support our decisions with data. So part of having a smart disaster recovery and rehabilitation is providing insights um, that can be used to support your ideas for the next decision making, like building a community center that has this set of resilient features and so on. Okay. And of course, maybe we can do something about the environment, like reinforcing the forests or the coastal areas, planting some mangroves, and so on. Okay, maybe we can do something that can restore the ecosystem and bring green infrastructure into the communities. So why not, right? And as you can see, we are in, of course, this disaster recovery um, has something about building and rebuilding infrastructures. So if we can do it right, then uh, that's the only chance we can recover today, rehabilitate tomorrow, and build a resilient future. The government, through the leadership of NEDA, or the National Economic and Development Authority, has come up with disaster rehabilitation and recovery planning guide. This is good until I think 2030. So after that, they're going to have uh, an updated version of it. Okay, so you can look for the PDF version. It's free on the internet. So just look for the just type in this keyword. Okay. Of course, you download only the one for the Philippines. If you are from the Philippines, but if you're from another country, then you download one for your country. All right. So, oh, uh, here's a recap. We already mentioned that, of course, before the disaster, what all we can do is to do something to mitigate and prevent the underlying risks. But at the same time, we do the necessary preparations. Okay, so that when the disaster strikes, the disaster requires uh, very quick response because every second counts. Okay, so meaning we should have a plan already. But as you can see, in comparison to disaster response, the recovery and rehabilitation usually takes a longer time frame. Okay, so let's try to zoom in it. Okay, so recovery involves addressing interim housing needs, restoring healthcare, public health and social services functions, support re-establishment of businesses, and provide information about opportunities to hazard mitigation activities. So that's the intermediate term. Okay, it will take some weeks or even months. Okay, but because of the disaster, sometimes the recovery and rehabilitation may take a very long time. So yeah, it could be take at least several months or even years because it involves development of permanent housing solutions, rebuild the infrastructures like the cell sites and the power grids, uh, the power tower. I forgot the term, sorry. The electrical power distribution systems. Um, and implement hazard mitigation strategies. So during the intermediate term, we are just studying, analyzing the information that we have. But by the end of the long term um, disaster recovery and rehabilitation, we are starting to implement hazard mitigation already, um, gearing up for the next cycle of the RRM. Okay, so that's a quick overview of disaster recovery and how it relates to to the rest of the DRRM. Now, specifically for this thematic area of DRRM, one of the main concerns is mapping the affected areas. Okay, so with that, we are very fortunate that we now have systems like GPS, Global Positioning System, and of course satellite systems that provide satellite images for remote sensing and analysis. And now they are leveled up by this type of technology, Geographic Information System or GIS. So this is basically a computer-based framework that captures, stores, manages, and analyzes and visualizes geographic data. So just like this one, recently the Pag-asa has launched the Panahon.ph. So this is a somewhat similar to their existing website, but this one has this is more on um, providing the chance for the users to simulate different scenarios. Okay, so they can run different simulations to further analyze the different hazards, especially hydrometeorological hazards. Okay, so um, it as you can see, maps are involved. And if you have noticed, since day one or session one, we featured Project Nawa. Okay, it involves a map. We also featured Georisk.ph, especially the Hazard Hunter. It has a map as well. We featured last session, what was that? The Flood Watch. Okay, it has a map as well. Right now, Panahon.ph, and then later on, the app that we are going to introduce, the Lifesaver, also is also map based. Okay, because they are all running through the technology called GIS, Geographic Information System. Okay, so this kind of technology provides accessibility for cost-effective solutions for LGUs and institutions. So everyone can use it, in other words. Okay, so that's the beauty of this technology. There are free or open source GIS applications that we can use, just like here, the ones provided by the OST and UP. Okay. Also, GIS provides scalability. It is applicable from community level, or if you want to level up to our national planning, no problem. So the GIS is upgradable to a wider scope. Okay, and also integration. We can integrate different these GIS platforms to our IoT system, to our AI powered robots, or for our field reports. And visualization. This is I think, the most obvious benefit of having a GIS. It provides visualization. Okay, clear map-based insights for better decision making. For example, this one, it was taken yesterday when I was creating the slides. There's an approaching, as of this point, there's an approaching typhoon in the Philippines. More on or closer to the northern part, right? So Batanes, I've heard, is under attack or under this threat, um this typhoon or the effects of this typhoon. So um hopefully people there are prepared enough to keep the communities safe and of course survive the effects of this disaster. Um And as you can see, knowing that there's of course, an upcoming typhoon, you can see it clearly. So your decisions can be based on it, right? So you have the insights, very clear insights, and that will help you come up with a better decision making, right? So these are some of the apps that I've mentioned. We have in session one, Project Noah. Session two, we have one of the apps of Georisk.ph. We have the Hazard Hunter. And then the OST or Pag-asa, aside from their website itself has a weather visualization like this, but they came up with panahon.ph, okay? Especially for those analyzing the scenario. And then we have um the one that we're going to talk about later, Lifesaver. So this is more on disaster recovery, or actually we can use this on disaster response and disaster recovery and rehabilitation. So we're going to talk about that in a while, right? But the point here is these technologies were made possible by GIS, right? So that's for mapping, again, for mapping affected areas. So um um we can have better insights for decision making. Okay. Also, GIS and our smart disaster recovery and rehabilitation with typically requires resource allocation and monitoring. So with the technology of GIS, we can actually do this. Plus, with the help of AI and IoT, we can do uh, we can do these things in a smart way. Okay? Our IoT-enabled resource visibility and tracking can help us with real-time sensing and tracking of resources and conditions for accurate location and monitoring. So, for example, we have emergency units. We can see on the map where are they deployed. Okay, so we can see which ones um, don't have the corresponding response units yet, which ones have severe need for a disaster response unit. Okay, so um, decision makers can be more or be wiser when it comes to these things. Okay, so analytics, just like um, the one I mentioned earlier, can be used for demand supply matching and performance evaluation. Of course, real-time sensing and okay, I forgot to update this, but never mind. Um, Also, AI, just like what we talked about last session, can be used in decision making and adaptive response. We can have automated insights and predictions to guide decisions and dynamically adjust actions. So, just like what we talked about last session, we can, for example, we have a lot of things to choose from, a lot of areas that need our response, our the quickest response possible. So with the help of AI, we can easily point out which ones should be given attention first. Okay, so um, that's resource allocation and monitoring. With the help of GIS, we can do that more efficiently and effectively, right? So special mention to the one developed by FIVOLX or the people involved in FIVOLX. We have the Hazard Hunter and the other applications under GRIS.ph that, of course, provide better insights and, most of all, optimize information flow. So they do that by integrating everyone, all the concerned government units and offices, even the other stakeholders like NGOs and the communities, um, to, of course, accept or receive the corresponding information that they need right away. Okay, the information flow to and from them are optimized, and that is made possible by the technology of IoT. So they are consolidated together through the cloud, where the consolidated data is verified and filtered before being reflected to these apps under GeoRisk.ph. They have GeoAnalytics PH, GeoMapper PH, Hazard Hunter PH, and map and features and other apps under GeoRisk.ph. Okay, so these are the guest-facing sides of this entire system. Okay, so um, the point is they are all many of them or most of them are very much dependent on the data visualized using GIS, right? And they can be used for resource allocation and improve the planning, right? And with that, we can have more sustainable rehabilitation strategy. So we can have a more resilient infrastructure and environment by building resistant systems while restoring ecosystems. Okay, so we don't just build, but also see what we can do to mitigate or at least to compensate with the damages in the environment, both brought by the humans and by the disaster. Also, with these technologies, we can restore livelihoods and make them become more sustainable and improve, of course, the overall economy. So we can diversify and strengthen income sources for long-term stability because of the insights that we have seen in uh, our GIS systems. We can see, okay, this one can be improved. We can put some of these infrastructures to improve the livelihood of the people in that community. So we can at least know which one needs which, okay? Which one should be prioritized, which one should be given this much, and so on. Okay, and of course, with these technologies, our strategy can lead to inclusive governance and community capacity. Okay, we can empower communities and institutions for sustained recovery. Sustained, meaning uh, it's not just a one-time recovery. So because of these initiatives, we can expect that each time the disaster strikes, we can have we can experience this level of effectiveness of disaster recovery. So it's not just a one time. Okay, we recovered now. How about in the future? Why can we expect that we can have that level of disaster recovery? Okay, so that's the question. And it's up to the government units, it's up to the professionals involved on how these rehabilitation strategies are to be enacted. Okay, of course, there's the question of willpower. The question is, are they willing? Okay, because some people have their agendas that can get compromised when these strategies um, must give way. I mean, must must push through, right? Like for example, the mining. Mining is good if done right, okay, in the right places. Okay, so and so on. I think you know uh that point. Now, with I really hope that I believe everyone has experienced some form or yep, some form of disasters at some extent. So hopefully we really hope that we have learned from it so that we for the next days to come we are now more resilient. We are now more prepared. We now have a better plan. We know what to do before, during, after the disaster. We have the information given to everyone and understood by everyone, such as with these technologies, Hopefully everyone can um will know when to prepare their go bags. Okay, the one being endorsed by or promoted by GMA. What to have in their first aid kit, hygiene kit, emergency tools, escape kit, documents and money, food and waters kit. Okay, how much to prepare, when to prepare, which part of their home should be used to store these items. And of course, that can be um, m- more effective if people within the community or within the organization know the evacuation plan. Okay, it's not enough that you have these emergency items, but the question is how when you need to evacuate, of course, to survive from the occurring disaster, do you know which way to go? Okay. Are you aware of the designated evacuation area of the community? So the DRM officials actually indicate as an evacuation area for each for their corresponding community. So, for example, there's a city that is prone to a tsunami. So, they must have an evacuation area for tsunami. So, that's ideally a high place with an open rooftop for possible use of helicopters for rescue. Okay, so something like that. People must know which way to go, and usually we do that by uh, holding or by implementing earthquake drills, fire drills, and other drills. Okay, and of course, it's very important to provide the corresponding hotlines. Okay, make everyone aware of the corresponding hotlines. Good thing that there's social media right now, but if we are too much dependent on it, what happens when the communication line gets cut off? If there's no signal during the disaster, so what will you do? So it's not always our phones that will save us during disasters. Okay, so there should be other ways to communicate with the emergency response units, and we have to take note of their numbers and whatever ways to um get or to communicate with them, to ask, of course, for their assistance. And what else? Of course, just remember, the OST is mostly or is the main in charge of disaster prevention and mitigation. So we have to understand how it works. Plus, in terms of preparedness, the ILG is the leader for that, the assigned leader. And then the SWD for the disaster response, and NEDA for the rehabilitation and recovery. Okay. So also pay attention to alarms. Okay. Take alarms seriously. And I really hope you give way for emergency messages being delivered by the OST and the RMC. Um, but they will not pop up in your feed if your feed is filled with nonsense stuff. Okay, so I really hope we give way. We unsubscribe and follow those nonsense or too much nonsense things, because we have to give way to important information being delivered real time by our government units. Okay, so that's especially if you're living in a high prone or a disaster prone community. Okay, so we encourage people in such communities to do some of these basic practices to prevent further um, losses when the disaster occurs. Okay, so meaning lesson learned. So in any of these things that we had a lapse or we had a loophole on, we must learn from it, of course, and uh, do the necessary action from it. Okay? So I think that ends our first half of this session. So we're going to talk about our activity and have a quick demo for it right after this video. So thank you very much for listening.